This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Saturday Social for Teachers. Who are teachers never forget? Today we're going to be talking about the qualities of great educators.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Let me set the scene. It's a leafy September day in a New England prep school. A classroom full of uniformed boys sit down for their first lesson of the new term. In comes a new English teacher. He comes in not loud, not commanding, but curious, alive. He doesn't start with a syllabus. He doesn't demand attention. Instead, he hops up onto a desk and tells his students, quote, "I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things in a different way." Now, that is not me just, editorializing off the top of my head. I have just ripped off the famous movie Dead Poet Society, which I was quoting there. But I do it because today we are talking about great teachers, those teachers who we can never forget. And now, without passing a judgment on Mr. John Keating one way or the other, what I want you to do as you listen to today's show is have in your mind an image of someone who you have personally known who really influenced you as a teacher, either when you were a pupil at school or perhaps a colleague, someone you know in your professional life. But luckily, it's not just me talking about great teachers today. I am joined by my fellow educator, Mr. Sam Houseago. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hi, Will. I'm good, thank you. The cherry blossoms are in full bloom now. Beginning to go into full bloom here in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
So had beautiful strolls today around the parks and rivers of Tokyo. And now I'm feeling very relaxed, enjoying my time here with you.
That's absolutely lovely. I'm sure it will all be downhill from here on.
We're going to get very self-reflective today. Oh God, we'll be good teachers.
I thought about trying to bring in some poetic image of, great teachers are like the fragile petals of the cherry blossom. They burst into full bloom for a brief, beautiful, brilliant moment before falling to the ground.
Exactly. We'll start jumping on our tables and breaking them because they're so cheap.
The only problem with comparing it to cherry blossoms is it makes it sound like teachers can only teach about 2 weeks at a time, because that's how long they last for.
I've just done 2 weeks now, so I'm finished as well.
Yeah. I mean, they are absolutely stunning. They are absolutely brilliant. But, I saw them last year and they were great. And then I saw them the previous year and they were also great. And, were they very different this year, the cherry blossoms? Do they change from year to year?
They don't change, and being very lucky that my school has cherry blossoms in its garden, it's still beautiful to just all the children are working away, and then I could just ignore them for a minute and look at the cherry blossoms as I contemplate, am I doing a good job?
Wonderful. Well, that sounds absolutely beautiful. You know what? The cherry blossoms may not change, but you know what does, Sam? We change.
We change
Lives. In the transient nature of time. How did we get here? I don't know. Let's get back on our subject. So today we are talking about what makes great teachers. Now, obviously, I'm starting with the assumption that we've all been lucky enough to have the experience of a great teacher. But I mean, even that word great, people might take a bit of issue with, because some people might say, oh, good teachers are what we should be talking about. Great creates an expectation a sort of an unfairly high expectation of
Ofsted
people.
just got rid of the one word judgment of teachers. So,
Did,
but no,
yeah.
let's bring it back to the next hour and a half. I think.
I hope we can bring the judgmentalism, if that is a word, back into teaching. That's what we're hoping to do here. So, as I was getting out of my own way here. If we all say we've all had experience of teachers, both when we were in school, but of course, if we're working in schools, then we will know lots and lots of different teachers, and we will have our own views on who is good, who is, let's say, great, who is maybe inspirational, who is maybe not those things, and why that is. So I hope that people will bring their opinions to this and their own ideas. Shall we start then with our own personal experiences? Can you tell me about maybe some teachers who you were taught by when you were younger and what made them, unforgettable to you?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in a classic British town. My primary school, the teachers were all middle-aged women who'd been there for 20 years, and I was probably one of 1,000, but they were very experienced. They knew the curriculum, they had taught the lessons, and I am very thankful that I can read and write so well. And it is down to that primary education. But I was quite quiet as a child, so I didn't really create that lasting image to them, probably as a student for them. Every time I had a parents' evening, it was like, Sam's a wonderful child, and how's his brother doing? We miss him. But I had some lovely teachers. I was taught only by women for the first 6-7 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say my favourite teacher, who I'd say had a very lasting memory, is when I was doing my A-levels, doing the now defunct, non-existent anthropology A-level. I was the first one to do it, being taught by a great man who had never taught anthropology in his life and had to replace his wife, who was going to teach us the program but had become very heavily pregnant. And we were learning with him. And we started off as a class of 30, and then we went all the way down to a class of 9. So you can imagine.
Well, why did that happen? Did he?
Because from A level, from AS to A level, you can drop one, and I think a lot of people dropped it to do psychology or some nonsense instead of anthropology.
I'm going to point out I did psychology at A level.
I also did psychology. I did all the ologies, but and then just as I think what people say, creating a relationship is one of the most important parts of being a teacher. You have to connect with those pupils, and we had great connections with him. I fondly remember the long rants he had about how much he hates pandas, and how they're terrible, terrible animals.
Is that idea that they sort of should have gone extinct if it wasn't for people helping them out because they're cute?
Exactly, and they eat bamboo even though it's allergic to them. I could talk about how terrible pandas are because
they are allergic to bamboo.
That's what he told me as a teacher, and I trusted him because we had such a good relationship. So, if that
I can see why he was so influential then.
Exactly. But I think that's what people remember. They were they don't remember. I don't remember the lessons, the maths, the learning my times tables. I just know I have it in my head, but I don't remember the exact watching my teacher on the board. But I just remember those random comments that used to come about, like very personal things. I remember my year 5 teacher sitting us down and saying, children, you should not drink Coke out of cans because they are in factories with mice and the mice do their business on them. And me as a child thinking, wow, that's right. That makes so much sense. And that's what made me to enjoy those teachers more, because they didn't stick. They didn't just stick to the curriculum. I'm just going to teach you all that. They also give you life lessons.
Some of their personalities coming through there.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
But not to get on too much of a tangent so early on, but I cannot help myself. I always wonder how to be in the classroom, right? I mean, you're never quite yourself. You're a version of yourself. You have to stick within, obviously, a sort of professional between in a sort of profession. You have to present yourself in a professional way, but you do sort of allow yourself you allow your personality to come out in the classroom. I mean, I certainly know one big difference between me when I was certainly a student teacher, definitely at the beginning of my career, and now is I feel I put a bit more of myself into what I do in the classroom. I've never mentioned, mice going to the toilet on Coke cans, but you do sort of say, oh, I did this on the weekend, or my wife and I, blah, 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 or whatever. I like to think that my kids now, my kids I teach now might know just that bit more about me than they did, than those children I taught at the very beginning of my career. And I hope not in some self-indulgent, oh, Mr. Mercer's prattling on again and telling some silly story again. I hope it's a bit more, you can relate what we're learning about to something interesting in your own experience.
When you realise that your class has created a personality for you in their minds, I think that's when you've realised you've made that connection, that you're not just this random person in the room, but like, Mr. Housego doesn't like Minecraft because he keeps on telling them to stop playing it, and they ask me questions of why I don't like it, and they've created that sort of persona in their mind. That's what Mr. Housego is.
I suppose they're going to do it for you.
Yes.
Whether you like it or not.
They will create the teacher personality. But you've got to try and make sure you shape it in a way for them as well.
You have to recognise that and accept that. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, if it wasn't, if it wasn't already obvious, we're both primary school teachers, so we are used to having our own class who we spend most of the time with. But I'm sure this applies just as much in secondary schools or in other settings as well.
With secondary school teachers, I'm quite fortunate now. I work closely with secondary school teachers. I teach a class for 9 months, so I get quite a short period of time with those kids in their whole educational career. So I have to work very fast to create that strong connection. While the secondary school teachers, they will teach years 7, 8, 9, and 10 all in that one subject. And if it's something like English, well, you're teaching them 4 times a week for the next 4 years, and especially if those teachers stick around and you stay in those sets and stuff, I don't think I moved around too much. I definitely had the same maths teacher. I had the same science teacher for 3 years, and I quite enjoyed him. Yeah. He was also quite young, and I remember him teaching me about motorcycles and using that to teach me energy, and I remember that very well because
was he a cool teacher?
He was a cool teacher.
He was a cool teacher.
He first started with a mohawk and then he shaved his head. I do remember that. He started off with a little mohawk and then he had shaved head.
That's actually quite cool. I think I'm not saying it in a snide way anymore. I think that is actually quite cool. But
he went against what I thought science teachers were meant to be.
Well, that's a bit. To be serious, that is part of it. At least I think you should, if you can challenge an assumption, especially. In my mind, what the best thing, maybe not the best thing, what an amazing thing a teacher can do for you, and maybe this is perhaps more in secondary than in primary, but I'm not sure, is change your view, your preconceived belief on what a subject is. I think a very, very good teacher can teach you history, let's say, or physics incredibly well, so that you retain that information, you have a good level of understanding, you understand that, you see the big concepts, the big ideas, and you can apply it and blah, blah, blah. But I think a really great teacher can take the child who has maybe already decided at 11 or 13 or whatever it might be that maths is not for me, French is not for me, I'm not a science person, and actually make you reconsider not your view on the subject as much as your view about yourself. And I think that's, I guess, transformation is what I'm talking about there. I think there is something where a really inspirational teacher can make you realize something about yourself that perhaps would never have happened had you not come into contact with them.
I remember the first time I realized I had a positive effect on a child, and it was during my teacher training, and I was working with this little boy. And he refused to write, and he started to cry, and he's like, my handwriting's ugly. And I was like, okay, can you just write me one single word? And then I just pointed at one of those letters and said, that is the best letter Y that I've ever seen. And I think you write your letter Y so great. Let's write a little bit more. And then eventually he went from writing a bit more and worked on his handwriting to help him with that. And then he started to, over the course of a few weeks, he actually, he was writing far better than when he started, and he actually was enthusiastic with writing. And I think every teacher, every good teacher should have that moment like, wow, I've just had a positive effect on that child, to, support them with their learning. And it can be just something as little as helping them see that their handwriting is not hideously ugly or something like that. And I think, hopefully all students, all people in the country of the UK or Japan or
You don't
wherever,
then will be lucky enough to have that experience.
have that and think like, wow, I had that one teacher who finally said that's a really good piece of work. Because sometimes it's scary, feel like we're being criticized a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, taking my own experience, there's one teacher I think of in particular. So I changed schools when I was 13. So, year 8 going into year 9, I went to a new school, and it was very, very different for all sorts of reasons from my previous school. And I was the only, I didn't know anyone at this school. I was one of 4 new people in the entire year group coming in that year. And
they make you stand up in assembly and go, this is Will, be nice to him. And then
please don't bully this boy.
And then every teacher realised that's a terrible idea. I don't get those students to stand up, please. It's so horrible.
I don't remember doing that, or maybe I did and I just blocked it from my memory as a trauma. But this teacher I'm thinking of, he was my form tutor, right? So he was an RE teacher, so I had that time with him. But actually, the biggest influence he had on me was as my form tutor, and it's very hard to put my finger on exactly what it was, but just, I don't know, he was welcoming, and he made this place seem completely non-intimidating in the most natural, breezy, effortless way. He brought a kind of joy to something that otherwise was a very big challenge for me. And it was amazing. He was just the right person for me at exactly the right time. And I think it's not a subject as such, but it's the pastoral side, I suppose, I'm talking about there. But that is a skill, and that is something that you can learn. I think something you can get better at.
Having that empathy to realise this child is in a new situation, and it is probably quite scary for them. How can I make this as easy as possible? Who's the right people to sit them with? Who can I introduce them to?
Yeah,
you have to be quite. It takes experience to do that. I think, because then when as teachers we should be reflective and thinking, did I do the right things? Did I help this child? Come in. And luckily, you had a very good teacher.
I was very lucky in that regard. I mean, I suppose part of, I'm going to speak in generalizations here, so I do apologize if someone listening to this says, "Well, that's not true. That's absolute rubbish." But I think there's something to this, because I know it was true for me. And so therefore, I think it must be true for at least some other people. When you start as a teacher, your very first day, your very first year, your own class, you have a lot of self-consciousness, and you have a lot of focus on, what am I doing? Am I ready for today? Am I doing the best job I should be doing? Do I belong here? Blah, blah, blah. That's totally natural. I'm not criticizing that at all. Part of it's because in order to get through your training year or training years, you have to be reflective. You have to be able to build. You have to have an element of, you have to be open to criticism, constructive criticism, coming from other people, but also you have to be open to it coming from yourself, I think, if you're going to be successful as a teacher. So what I'm saying is that when you're new in the classroom, often that is where a lot of your focus and your energy goes. And you would hope that as you become more experienced, as you have certain tricks and strategies and things you learn, as it becomes easier to be in the classroom and to deliver a good lesson, you have more time and you have more focus and more energy to put on the children, and to really, really think about them and what they need from you in that moment. And it's tough to do that, but once you get to that stage, that's when you can really deliver.
And it's like you said, it's about cultivating that teacher persona that you want to be. I would say there's no such thing as a single good teacher that every teacher is like. Otherwise, we all have very dull lessons, probably, because I think going through the system of having different teachers who have different strengths, I think, is what I guess, and all being very good teachers gives a child an excellent education. But it does, I think it does take time to realize what your teacher persona is and what your strengths are and what, areas that you want to continue growing in and improve. I don't think any teacher should say, "Oh, I'm just terrible at teaching maths, and I'm just always going to be terrible at teaching maths." But I'm great at teaching RE, and really nodule in that. I think that's
Well, would you want that from your kids? I mean, I think most of us, right, would say to our, if you had a child, if you had a child who said, "Oh, I'm great at maths, but I'm terrible at English," or whatever it might be. I think our reaction would be to challenge that.
exactly.
So we need to challenge that in
balance.
ourselves as well, right? All right. So let me ask you then, what's your teacher persona? What do you think they would say if I could interview some of your children here? What would they say about Mr. Housego?
I definitely have had parents being like, "I'm glad that you're my child's teacher because you're the strict teacher." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not the strict one." I think I try to have consistency in my expectations, and I challenge children when they are, trying to push the boundaries and such. And I like to create a calm and peaceful environment, and that does, reminding children of, when it's appropriate to be talking and when it's appropriate to be listening and so on. And that's the kind of what I try to create. And I thought I generally see smiles in my classroom. Have I made a child cry? I think we all have. I would definitely say consistently with high expectations. I try to create fun lessons where there's lots of interaction and discussion as well, but also children know that I'm going to be challenging them and that I'm going to. I'm currently teach year 3. We're about to end the year, and I say to my kids, "You're no longer year 3, you're year 4, and you're now ready. You're early, and that's what I'm going to be treating you like." And they push back like, "No, we're year 2, we're year 2." Like, "Nope, I'm going to treat you like you're year 4 now because you've only got what." I want to say 7-8 weeks.
So you're a Mr. High Expectations.
Maybe, maybe I don't know.
Sorry, I'm putting it on the spot. I know it's an awkward question because I think we all have. Yeah, we must all have asked ourselves this at some point, and we don't know what the answer is.
No.
We can never really know because, of course, each child that you've ever taught will probably have a slightly different answer to it. And would they ever tell you the truth, even if you were to ask them? Not that you would. Probably not.
I definitely think I've been the best teacher for some children, and for other children, they're just, their teaching style, my teaching style, and their learning style just didn't gel. And it happens.
I think that's probably inevitable, right? I mean, I don't know.
Especially when you get into the hundreds. I've probably taught over 100 kids now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether people would really disagree with me on this one or not. But I mean, I think you can do your best by every child in the class. Yeah. And you can do a good job, and you can do right by them, and take their needs seriously, and all this, that, and the other. But just as in your own life, in your personal life, there are some people you will simply gel with, and others you won't. That does happen with the children to some extent. Like, there are some kids you just get, and they get you.
Yeah, like they say, you've got to try and create that rapport, that relationship with your pupils. But if I just met 30 adults now in one of those weird mixer things, I wouldn't be able to create a rapport with all 30 of them. Similarly, I wouldn't be able to create a rapport with all 30 children. We try our best. We never give up. We don't we don't ignore a child, but we always try to we always do our assessments. We always do give them targets and give them support, but sometimes they're...
Well, returning to what we were talking about quite near the beginning, this idea of showing a bit of your real self, or I think maybe sharing your personality and your interests and really what you care about with your class. I mean, kids will start to do that with us a bit, and it can take a while, but there's some children they'll sort of give us something. They bring themselves to the class. I mean, there are some kids who turn up and they come from they're perfectly fine, and they come from lovely supportive homes, and they're great, but they're quiet and they learn a lot with you. But I've asked myself at the end of the year, do we have when you're writing the reports, let's say, that child, it might be quite difficult to write a report for because you really have to think about what to say about them. But there's other kids, you sit down to write the report and it just flows, and you could write pages about them because you have developed, and it's not favoritism. It's not, I like this child more. It's definitely not that. What it is I just understand this human more because I've seen more of them throughout the year.
Exactly. It's the child who's never had a day off because they want to come to school and all of
Mm.
that because they're enjoying it and so on and so forth. I think as a primary teacher, I felt like, oh God, I feel very uncomfortable talking about this. But then
Mhm.
as a specialist teacher, I bet you they all have favourites. I bet, the kid that's really good at PE, the kid that's really good at violin and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know,
Well, here's a question, and it's coming from one of our listeners to Gillian Gabriel. Gillian says, here is a question. Does being great mean different things to students, parents, and other teachers? I think that's a fantastic question. We are going to take just one moment to think about Gillian's brilliant question, and we'll be back in a moment with the answer.
it's 42.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Okay, and we are back. This is the Saturday Social. I am Will Mercer. I'm joined by Sam Housego. We're talking about the teachers we can't forget, what makes a great teacher. And we had a brilliant question on the Podbean app from Gillian Gabriel, talking of which, if you haven't already, download the Podbean app and join the conversation. So, Gillian asked, does being great mean different things to students, parents, and other teachers? Sam, over to you.
Oh, we'd start with, I guess, so we've not spoken about it much with the parents. I definitely think parents have an idea in their mind of where they want their pupil to go, their child to go. They're not pupils to them. And they also kind of want you to pretend that the other children don't exist and for you to focus solely on their child. Actually, well, I've had some lovely, wonderful, understanding parents. And I think the parent's expectations on the teacher is to be a good one is one who communicates well to the parent, or well to what each parent wants. Some parents want to hear nothing. Some parents want to be spoken to every single day. And then as well, one that will, bring the child to the destination that the parent is seeing their child go to. I'm at a school where some of the parents have already chosen the university that the child is going to, and they're only 6 years old. While some of the parents are like, he's a good kid, maybe he'll be a bricklayer when he's older. We'll see what happens. And I think just as we need to understand who the children are, we need to understand who their parents are, where they're coming from.
And what's a good way to do that?
Talk to them. I really generally liked going outside my room at dismissal and, being seen by the parents. I would go out and make sure I'm a little bit closer to that. I can say, go to your mum, go to your father, go to what I hope is your grandmother, who's waving at you. And then they can come and speak to me anytime. And unfortunately, I'm not in that situation right now. And I do miss that, because it did mean that I was able to just have 2 minutes to chat to parents, and they really appreciated that. And,
a teacher I once worked with said every single school, doesn't matter where you are in the world, what type of school you are, you all have a choice. You exist on the spectrum where, on the one hand, you can choose to be a fortress and be a castle with the drawbridge completely raised up with the moat surrounding you. And on the other, you can be totally open and you can have almost no walls, or you can have all your doors are unlocked, or however you want to think of it. And I think every school needs to choose exactly where it is.
There's a balance of when it's between 8 and 4, my doors are open. But once it gets to once the time is finished, then the drawbridge close. And maybe I can see and say, give you a little wave.
Maybe you can look out over the parapets and sort of see what you're up to out there.
And do I need to get the bow and arrow out? Shoo you away and just remind you, doors open later. I think parents, are quite now respectful of our time. But, in this day and age, they are, even at previous schools in England, they had my email and they could message me whenever they want. If they ever did, I'd probably be like, just come talk to me. That's the best. And I think that's the best way to show that you're being a good teacher to the parent.
Even the act of making time, it can be, obviously, it adds to your workload and everything, but the act of making time, being face-to-face, that in itself says quite a lot. And that can often diffuse what could otherwise be quite a terse email or tense phone call.
If you create that good relationship with the parent, then it's going to happen. It might not be that parent, it might be another parent, but you're going to have those hard conversations where it's like, your child's done this thing which is not great, and we're going to have actually a serious conversation. And if you have that good relationship, they'll be more receptive to listen, to understand. And then I've had some parents come to me for some advice on, how to support their children at home. I had a parent ask me, how do I help my child who doesn't want to watch Disney because they're scared of it? And it's like, did
that not come up in your teacher training?
No, exactly. And the parents just want some help as well. So I think that's how you can be a good big communicator, is what parents would want. Which would be different to a child. A child usually probably wants to be left alone.
I something that I'm not, I wish I was better at, but I sometimes try to sort of basically chat to kids almost like I would chat to an adult. And sometimes it works if they really want to talk to you and stuff. But sometimes, kids, like, they're 7 years old, they don't want to chat about their weekend to me or whatever. They just go, fine, whatever, and move on. And you're right. Sometimes kind of less is more.
So what a pupil would probably want to see as a good teacher, they want someone who's kind. They want someone who is caring and will listen to them, because they are going to, have problems, which some people will be like, oh, okay, they pushed you over. Did you go speak to them and all of that? But to help them, someone who can help them engage in those social interactions, which are new to them as well, not just someone who will teach them, the times tables and how to write. They, the pupils want to also have that relationship and all of that. But it's, for them, it's about being the kind. It's
about patience, kindness,
the listener, and someone who will help them navigate in what is a very new world to them, And
I'm gonna throw in a sort of, I don't know if it's a counter example or what you might call it, but I find sometimes, especially when they get a little bit older, kids can be very, maybe it's an age thing, maybe it's a sort of developmental thing, but they can be quite rule obsessed.
Mm.
And they can go through a phase of saying, oh, they go home and tell their parents, oh, so-and-so in the class got away with this. Or, this child didn't do the thing that everyone else was supposed to, and they didn't get told off. That's terrible. So I think sometimes kids, I absolutely agree, they want the patience, they want the calm, the kindness, all of that. But they want a sense of fairness. You kind of have to be an impartial arbiter of the law. Let's put it that way. Now, I know that sounds very grandiose and pretentious, but sometimes it can feel like you are being asked to be the kind of, enforcing the law, and you are the person who ensures that justice exists in the world for these children. Sometimes, at least that's what it can feel like to me. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into situations sometimes. And you can do it. It's absolutely fair, but it's a lot to do. It's a lot to juggle at the same time, as well as teaching and differentiation.
As they say, you're not just a teacher; you're also the parent,
Yeah.
the tooth fairy, Santa Claus,
Mm-hmm.
the therapist, the social worker.
Yes,
you have lots of roles in this, and that's what teachers. We've got many faces, and another thing which I think the children want is to have a teacher who tells them how they're doing in an honest and open way, and in a way that doesn't seem scary or off-putting to them, and to being like, okay, so you don't know your 8 timetables just yet, but actually do you know your 4 times 8, your 2 times 8, your 1 times 8, so you're already halfway there, mate. So you do know half of it,
mates.
So, buddy, kid,
pal. Hey buddy, learn some times tables.
Sorry, I forget we have to refer them as darling child. You know half of it, darling child. And to just help them to realise that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely.
But we also have to remember, I'm the best teacher this year, and then next year, that's the best teacher in the world.
Yes,
and that's who they love. And
for all we talk about relationships, and all we talk about being, maybe the great teacher and the influential teacher, and all is not forgotten. No child is purely ours and never will be. And I think it would be very strange to approach your teaching with that mindset. You share all the children in your class with every other teacher and every other adult actually in the school they will interact with.
One thing which I like to do is near the end of the year is hype up who I think is the next teacher going to be. So to get the child excited to go to whoever class it is, then I'm not going to tell them that's their teacher, but I'm going to remind them, like, look at them, look how nice they are, look how great they are, they're a really kind teacher. And one of my favourite things is to hear the scream of cheering when they find out who that teacher is.
Oh, that's really lovely. That's really lovely, because I've worked in a school before where the opposite happened, where children were going up to 2 different classes. One teacher, fairly or unfairly, had the reputation as the strict one, the scary one, and the other one, fairly or unfairly, had the reputation of being the funny one. And you can guess who cheered when they found out they were in so and so's class, and who when they found out they're in the other person's class.
Yeah, and I think I'll get some. I've got some pupils who are younger, and I try to be a positive presence around them, but I really hope I'm the one that they cheer for, what they moan about.
Is being liked important?
No, I'm not their friend. I'm friendly, but I'm not their friend. And if they say, I don't like you, Mr. House, I can say, well, that's fine, but I'm still going to teach you.
Because I guess we chose as the title for this show, not the teachers who we love, or maybe not the teachers who we like the most, but the teachers we don't forget. I mean, certainly when I think back of my teachers who I really remember, and I would say did a really, really good job, some of them, were friendly and were lovely, but not all of them were. In fact, some of them were quite strict or quite stern, actually.
They created a safe space.
Yes,
and
they were fair, but stern.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm firm but fair. And you might see it as being strict, but I've set an expectation. I've set a guidance. I've set a rule, which is please do not talk over me while I talk, because I need to see that you're listening, and I will continue that. And it's not that specific child; it's all of you.
Yeah.
And it's also the pupils outside of this classroom. That's what makes it fair.
Well,
and I even check with them, like, am I being unfair? And they go like, no, and if you think I'm being unfair, please tell me, and then I'll make it more fair. So
if you're going unfair, tell me and I'll show you what unfairness is, boy. Sorry, I'm reading Matilda with my kids. I've been reading it with them recently, and they absolutely love it. And it's funny because Miss Honey, she's presented as the fantastic teacher, the one who really sees Matilda as she is, and you're making a face at me.
Well, controversially, I don't think Miss Honey's the best teacher ever because she just focused on one kid who she then adopted, which is definitely...
Is that a clash? Is that a conflict of interest, Miss Honey?
She clearly had her favourite. What about that poor girl who was swung around by her pigtail? Why are you not adopting her?
Absolutely. So if we go back to Gillian's questions, we talked about students, parents, other teachers. All right. So
is SLT a teacher if they're not in the classroom? Are they still the teachers?
Why not? Let's say other colleagues,
other colleagues, our colleagues.
Yeah, or other people, other adults you work with.
Other human beings in the same room as me.
It's like we're just going to define this as a pure abstraction at this point, aren't we?
So for what I see good teachers are doing things that I could never do, making those beautiful displays of wonderful work and that really amazing creative writing lesson that somehow had art and photography and videography in there. How on earth do you have the energy and time for that and the creativeness?
It's when they do this stuff that, like you say, the stuff that you couldn't do or you feel you couldn't
feel like I can do, and then I can go to them like, how do you do that? That's really great. What kind of advice? And, I think every teacher's got that. So there's something that they do that I can't do. Or they've got these little tricks or tidbits that they have.
Those ones who can handle the really difficult situation, be it a difficult class, a tough situation with certain parents or whatever it might be, and can do it without flapping, with a sort of calmness and a dignity. That I think we really respect, because we know how hard those things can be, and we know how we feel when we encounter those tough situations. And who knows what that teacher might be feeling on the inside, but if they can project an aura of calm, and I think dignity is actually the right word for a lot of it, then that's very admirable. And you look at them and you think, kind of, maybe part of it is just, I wish I had that. Maybe we all think that, and that's what we look for in other teachers, and that's what we admire in them.
Exactly. And the teacher who's supportive and not critical, and is open and flexible, and all of that. When one of the worst feelings we have as teachers is that when we take the sick day, and we know our colleagues are going to take over our class, and we have to write up the plan, and we're not feeling great anyway. It's
and we try to put everything into the email, and here are all the links, and just in case this thing doesn't work, here's a backup. And
to be honest, I just hope that teacher goes into that classroom and does whatever they want for the day. And it's just like, I'm going to teach them this lesson. And then they'll come back to me and they'll say, we thought you could teach that lesson, Mr. House, ago, because we don't know what you've been teaching. That's fine with me. Because to be honest, I'd probably try and be as flexible as possible if I had a colleague on a sick day.
The nicest, sorry, I'm going to get very, very personal and very, very self-indulgent here, so you're all just going to have to indulge me for a moment. Sorry. Is I thought I say that quite a lot on these podcasts, maybe too much. The nicest thing a colleague ever said about me, it was when I was leaving a school, and going around and saying lovely things. It was really, really sweet. And a certain teacher said, I've never heard him say a bad word about anybody. Now, I'm me. I'm pretty sure I have at some point. I am human. But I would never, if you asked me to predict what that teacher was going to say, that's not what I would have said. Not because I think I am particularly back criticizing people or anything, but that is just not what I would have said. And when he said, I found it was very, very touching. It really stayed with me. And it's something that I think I do try to hold on to, because, as we all have to blow off steam from time to time. But I think if you take it too far, it will always come back in a bad way to bite you later on, for sure. Because, of course, if you listen to someone criticize, so I guess we're talking about the flip side now. We're not talking about great teachers. We're talking about how can we let ourselves down sometimes. And, of course, if you are criticizing someone else's practice, perhaps unfairly, to other people in the room, and if you make a habit of that, if you're doing it habitually, other people will ask the absolute fair question, which is, well, what do they say when I'm not around?
Yeah.
And, that's how things go south very quickly.
Every teacher has taught a bad lesson. Every teacher has taught a bad week. We all have off days, and we are, we're getting new curriculums. It's always constant change. You have to be adaptable. The way they teach English is always changing. The way they teach maths is always changing. They give us these new technologies and stuff. And we have to just remember we're all in it together. We are a community. We're a team. My classroom, my teaching doesn't just end with my classroom. It's also everyone else in this building, and how we can support and help each other, building up our teaching assistants so that they can have more confidence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we say great teacher, we don't just mean the teacher. We also are including those who are doing teaching, be they EAs, TAs, whatever, in the room.
I'm really happy that we've had our wonderful nurse at school come in and lead some sessions, and how we can support them. And they have knowledge that I would never have. I don't know how to teach kids to brush teeth. I don't know the proper technique for that.
Right. I mean, the same teacher who I mentioned before, who said that nice thing, he once said something in the staff room that, again, it really stuck with me. And he is someone who I thought had many wonderful qualities as a teacher I really admire. And I remember once saying to me, he goes, well, how often do you teach a bad lesson? And I was a bit thrown by this. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I just had something flim-flammy. And he goes, yeah, I think I do one about every 2 weeks. I teach a real stinker. No, I mean, he was being funny. Maybe he was being a bit facetious. But I think he wanted to believe the point he was making, which is that, even if you feel you're absolutely at the top of your game and things are going really, really well, sometimes for whatever reason, a lesson will fall short of your own expectations. And it's perfectly fine to own that. And it's perfectly fine to say that in front of your colleagues. I mean, I think that's probably a sign of when things are going very well in a school, the teachers can be that open with each other.
So many factors of whether a child can pay attention in class. Did they get a good night's sleep? Is it raining? Are they having a fallout with their friends? Is it a full moon? And so on and so forth.
You never know what's going on.
You never know what's going on.
You can do your best, but you never fully know what's going on in people's private lives. Colleagues, children, whatever it might be. Let me ask a question here then. So we've talked a lot about the qualities of good teachers, and I think some have come up in the discussion, things like patience, an interest in our children, an attempt to build rapport, even when it's difficult, even while recognizing it may be very, very difficult. We don't give up and we try. That support of our children, getting them to see the best of themselves, to try things that they may be wanting to write off, all that stuff. But to what extent I'm not going to say born with it, but I'm going to say, to what extent is it part of who you are when the very first time you stepped in a classroom? And to what extent are all these good qualities things that you learn, consciously or unconsciously, in your professional career? To what extent is it part of you already and maybe always will be? And to what extent do we learn to be good or to be great?
I think the first thing I think there's a lot to learn. I think your natural personality, such as being empathetic and kind and, enjoying the presence of being around 30 very small children, I think. And there are definitely people who don't like children who should not be. If you don't like children, don't become a teacher.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because I think I should have added that to my list I was just talking about there. Joy. I think you've basically got to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. You're with them for a long time. You have to enjoy it.
Not every day. You won't be laughing every single day, but you must be able to take joy in a good lesson well done.
Exactly, and to have fun with them. They learn so much better when they have fun, and when you show your enjoyment, the kids can tell. The kids are like sponges. They can really vibe off your person, your current demeanor that day. If you're having an off day, they're going to have an off day as well. And some, but one thing which I think you definitely have to learn as a teacher, and it took me a long time, is good public speaking. And it's hard. The first time I remember standing up in front of a group of, what would be 60 little eyes staring at me, waiting for me to speak. And it's terrifying. I found it terrifying because my persona was quite shy.
I remember the very first time I did it, and it was a student, lesson and everything. I remember my hands.
Yeah.
I had to give out some sheets,
Yes, and
it was really difficult because my hands were. I don't know if I even felt that nervous, but I looked down and I realized my hands were shaking, and I couldn't properly. I had to ask someone to hand out the sheets for
exactly,
me.
and then the children go like, "Wow, okay, is he all right?" And
fresh meats.
Exactly. I did it with a year 6 class. I don't teach year 6 anymore. I'm quite badly. And then it comes with experience. That you get used to it. You create that. I worked to create that teacher voice as well, how I speak, so that I can make sure that the children can understand me. Especially I was in an EAL setting as an ALT, so I had to make sure I was very, pronouncing well, and that helps me with other children as well. How I posture standing, don't put your hands in your pockets. Point to the actual word you're reading when you're reading off the board. So that children can follow you.
Yeah. Which might sound, if you've not done it, it might sound, of course, it's obvious. But it's not in the moment because you're doing so many things at once. To consistently remember to do those things, that's hard.
Do you know how hard it is to have a stack of 24 phonics cards and then switch them out as fast as possible? To go A, E, I, O when you're doing speed sounds? That's skill. And you have to practice it. And it's if they're laminated, laminating, learning how to laminate and not cut yourself. It's a mixture of both. There are some certain qualities that, it doesn't. We all have some levels of empathy. Some are more than others. Some more patience than others. Patience, I think, can actually be learned a bit. I think you can learn to be more patient.
I think so. I think you can change your perspective on it. I mean, one thing I've learned one way I think very differently now to how I did at the beginning of my career was, if you see, working in the primary context here with quite young children, if you see when behaviour falls short of what you would expect, do you see that as a willful act of disobedience? So a child is pushed into the line because they don't care about other people and they are doing it just to test your authority, or do you interpret that as almost a lack of knowledge? Maybe they are doing those sorts of things because they just don't know better. And it sounds obvious to an adult because it is obvious to an adult. But maybe if you're 7 years old, you're someone that actually needs to take you aside and explain that, look, if you're going to push into the line, other people, well, that's not fair on other people. How would you feel if people did it to you? Do you think it will make other people like you? Will people want to be your friends? Blah, blah, blah.
When you go to McDonald's, you see other people pushing the line. It's always McDonald's.
Exactly. Go with what they know. But but that's it. And I know this sounds very, but you are talking to a child. You really do have to put that part of that. And I think when you approach behavioural issues that way, not always appropriate in every situation, I do realise that's something where I've changed my mindset, and experience has shown me that is probably what's happening, and the results that I get with it, I feel, are better than the results I was getting at the very beginning of my career. Right, so we've done a lot of talking about at the beginning of our careers as we teach now. Is there a time frame here? Do you think that it's unrealistic to expect someone to be, a great teacher, a good teacher, as soon as they step into the classroom? Does it take a year, 5 years, 10 years? Does it take an entire career? Or am I asking a silly question by trying to put a number on it?
I'm very glad I don't have to do the 2-year ECT course, because I think that's 3 years before you're the fully qualified teacher. And because I first felt when I was a good teacher was at the end of my third year, because I had left the school, which was my NQT school, because I didn't want to be seen as an NQT. It wasn't that the school was bad or anything like that. It was a very lovely school, and I still enjoy following what they're doing.
Mm.
But I wanted to make sure that I went to school and not seen as that ECT NQT person.
I mean, in a way, am I asking a slightly different question, which is, at what stage are you experienced, or at what stage do you stop being? I mean, obviously, you stop being an NQT after NQT, but at what point do you stop feeling like an NQT or an RQT or whatever you want to call it?
I guess it's different for each person, but I think there's no end result. I'm not a finished product now. I'm a different teacher than I was 2 years ago. I imagine you also feel the same after moving. Yes. And I think any good teacher is self-reflective and thinking, how can I improve my practice? It's constantly changing, and I think if there's a teacher who's still teaching the same lesson that they taught in the exact same way they did 10 years ago, I think it needs a bit of a refresh.
All right. Okay. Talking of which, this is the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer. I'm talking to Sam Housecoat about what makes great teachers. We're going to listen to some news now.
Hi, secondary school teachers. We're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering math circles across the UK.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Website The Conversation features details of new research which suggests that parents may not play a role in the development of maths anxiety amongst their children. Existing research indicates that maths anxiety is present amongst pupils in their first years of primary school, and that it interferes with maths learning and performance. This new research, conducted in collaboration with 3 universities in Italy and Loughborough University in the UK, looks into the role parents play in the development of the anxiety. The research followed 126 children from Italy from the age of 3 to 8, assessing their maths skills and their level of maths anxiety at key points. Parental maths anxiety was measured at the start of the study. The results indicate that having a parent with higher levels of maths anxiety did not make it more likely that their children would also have it. This is different to general anxiety. However, the research did show that children of parents with maths anxiety did less well at maths. In preschool children's numeracy, skills were lower if their parents were more anxious about maths, and those children continued to have lower maths attainment by the age of 8. But, unlike reading, where research clearly indicates that parental engagement with it increases children's level of skill, maths is more complicated. Sometimes parental involvement made things worse. Other things like playing number games and counting had minimal effect. Full details of the summary of the research can be found at theconversation.com. In related news, maths appears in a story from the Monmouthshire News, which says that the new research indicates that 71% of parents in Wales couldn't pass Grade 4 GCSE maths. When given a sample question, a survey of 2,000 parents and carers found that only 21% got it right, with 34% admitting they didn't know the answer and 37% getting it wrong. The results came from a survey conducted by Flash Learning, and it also showed that 65% of parents believe supporting their children with GCSE homework resulted in them needing to do their homework first. 57% of Welsh parents also believe that they would fail the exam if they sat it today. The Mail Online covers more reaction to the Netflix drama Adolescence. This time it is comments from Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson as she called for more male teachers to provide strong, positive male role models. Speaking at the inaugural Festival of Childhood in London, Phillipson said boys needed to be raised with the strength to reject hatred being spread online. She echoed recent warnings from former England football manager Gareth Southgate and police chiefs who have cautioned about the impact social media influencers can have. The festival was hosted by Children's Commissioner Dame Rachel de Souza, and Miss Phillipson spoke at length about the dangers of disinformation, toxic role models and hatred, and stressed the importance of thinking analytically, weighing up arguments and reasoning. Ms Phillipson did acknowledge that the responsibility does start at home, with parents, but added, "I want more male teachers, teaching, guiding and leading the boys in our classrooms." The BBC covers the judicial review of the government's policy of adding VAT to private school fees. Barristers representing Chancellor Rachel Reeves, HMRC, and the Department for Education said private school parents paying their fair share would help raise standards for children who attended state schools. The judicial review was brought by 3 separate groups, including parents of children with special educational needs and disabilities and low-paying faith schools. The groups claim the policy is discriminatory and incompatible with human rights law. Full details of the story can be found on the BBC News website. The hearing decision is expected at a later date. Finally, BBC Breakfast covered the opening of an exhibition at the Food Museum in Stowmarket, Suffolk, which offers visitors the opportunity to sample semolina, pink custard and turkey Twizzlers. The showcase of school dinners through the ages from the 1940s to the present day will help visitors learn about the history of school meals policy. The museum's director, Jenny Cousins, said school dinners were a cross-generational experience, and that whilst the food tasting added a bit of fun, there was a serious side of the history of why we feed children at school. The exhibition will remain at the museum until February 2027. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
And welcome back. To the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer and I'm talking to Sam Housego about what makes great teachers. I'm going to start this segment with another quote, this time from J.R.R. Tolkien, from one of his letters. He said, quote, "A good teacher is like a lamp. It consumes itself to light the way for others." So I think that's an interesting one. It sounds lovely. It also sounds quite sinister if you take it too far. You know, it calls to... Like, it brings to mind an image of, well, self-immolation, right? You're burning. We talk about teacher burnout.
Yes.
Well, what does a lamp do if not burn out? And here's where I'm gonna ask a sort of different question, the reverse really of what I've been asking up to this point, which is what happens when things don't go right? Because up to now, I think we've talked about teachers becoming more experienced and learning things and basically becoming better the more they're in the classroom and the more they go through their career. So I'm going to flip the question on its head now, and I'm going to say maybe, how can we stay good? Or how can we stay great, if you like? How can we stop a slide? Now, one reason I want to ask this question is going back to a certain teacher I talked about before, who was absolutely brilliant to me when I joined a school at the beginning. By the time I was in sixth form, I had this particular teacher, and we didn't have the best year together. Now, I don't just mean me and him. It was actually us and the class as a whole. And me and a very good friend of mine who were in the same class, we spent years talking about this particular teacher and what happened to him in that last year. It was our A-level year. And I mean, we just concluded that he was having a lot of personal problems and was essentially, that was coming through in his classroom practice because, he didn't do anything, I don't want to sound too dark, he didn't do anything wildly unprofessional. He didn't do anything that was shocking or anything like that. But the light had gone. There was we talked about joy before. It suddenly turned into, rather than this person who sort of bounded into the classroom, who was happy to teach us and was excited to see what we would bring and was excited to share what he wanted to share with us, we got someone who would sort of turn up late, we could occasionally cancel lessons, would return homework maybe several months after we had handed it in, who basically didn't care anymore. Now, I don't know the wider circumstances here. I don't know what this teacher was like with other classes. I don't know whether after I left that school, this teacher turned it all around and had a wonderful few years, whatever. But that's a question which I am a teacher, I ask myself a lot. I think I don't want to get complacent. I don't want to assume that, the longer you teach, the better you are. And what I'm really interested in digging down into now is how do we stop that happening to us? How do you stop complacency or something worse settling in?
I think that comes down to having good SLT, good senior leadership, who are supportive, who are there to have conversations and to understand. Did any of his head teachers and leadership speak to him about, hey, what's going on? Hey, you're not handing in your homework back. Is there anything we can support? And it's not about telling off, it's about supporting. And, if there is personal things going on, or if the joy is left, being like, why is the joy left? And finding out, is our marking too intense? Is
it something that the school can help with?
Is it just one teacher? Is it many teachers? Have we got a cohort going on? And then, as with teachers,
but is there, sorry, I interrupt, but is there something that we can do ourselves to be self-sufficient in this way?
Fine, like I was talking about, having the supportive being vocal about it. If you are having a struggle, talking to people about it and saying, I don't think I'm doing good practice. I've unfortunately have had the experience where I opened up to a teacher and said, I don't think I'm doing my best this week. And she said, I don't want to hear that. One of my least favorite things I've ever been told is leave it at the door, which I think is just so unfair to us as human beings. We are emotional, we are complex, we are a roller coaster ride of ups and downs. And we want to make sure that if practice is sort of consistently going down, we're noticing the behaviour is getting a little bit more wild. The quality of work that the children are producing isn't as to our expectations or what we have previously seen. You know, we're being reflective and being like, it's one thing which I think older teachers dread, which is, can you just come in and just observe me teach for a little bit?
Right.
I dread it.
Yep.
It's the least favourite thing, but I think it is good practice for just to have, they don't need to come in for the full 45 minutes and have to a full report and doing all this. It's just like, come in and see how...
I don't know what you found in your experience, but this is something I saw very early on in my very, very first teaching practice. I had a teaching mentor who was, as far as maybe there was something else going on I don't know about, but as far as I know, they were just having a lesson observed by the head teacher. That was it. And my God, was that a big drama. It was weeks of planning, weeks of stressing about it. You know, I won't go into all the details, but essentially this teacher did not handle it calmly, let's say, to say the least. And I felt, you know, I was thinking, well, I'm a student. I get observed all the time. I get written feedback, verbal feedback. We'd have meetings about pretty much everything I do with these kids. And I'm not stressing about it. And it would be weird. It would be, it wouldn't be very helpful if I did. And roughly speaking, my experience as I've been a teacher is the more recently someone entered the profession, in lots of ways, the less they seem to worry about being observed and about formal feedback and about being, quote unquote, checked up upon. And the longer they teach, not always, obviously, but sometimes the longer they've been teaching, the more they can approach that process with dread. Now, I don't know whether that's simple practice. If you are in your first or second year of teaching, your experience so far has been one of pretty much constant oversight. So actually, you're pretty used to it. And if you've been teaching for 30 years or something, these observations don't come around that often. So you're just not in this practice as much, or whether there's something deeper.
And there's a new form of observation with technology, which is recording your lessons and sitting with someone and watching yourself teaching, which is the worst thing for me. I come in and observe me, that's fine, but I don't want to observe myself.
Yeah.
Is that something that maybe I could be working on? Sure, fine, but there have been teachers who have taught for 30 years and never had to watch themselves exactly because
and they think, I did not sign up to this 30 years ago.
Yes, so that's something that I would definitely ever have to dread. Luckily, I think I've had one lesson recorded and I watched about a minute of it and I was like, I'm done, I'm fine. I'm fine. You watch it and tell me and it's okay. I don't.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I guess you have to maintain a certain reflectiveness, a certain self-criticism, I suppose, for want of a better term. Because, of course, otherwise you become complacent. Otherwise you become that teacher who's using the same lesson plan they used 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. You become that same teacher who says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which is fine up to a point, but only up to a point. You become that teacher who has the chair in the staff room that other people aren't supposed to sit in. And I think once you reach that point, you probably need to mix it up a bit at that point.
You never know, chairs can be moved around. They're just in the same place.
That's very deep.
I know that next year I did a really good unit about fables. It linked to my unit, but do I need to teach the exact same fable? No, not really. I do.
Well, are you ever going to teach the exact same kids? No,
I'm not going to teach the exact same kids as well. I hope not. I don't know if anyone needs to be. I don't think anything needs to be held behind. But I'm going to adapt it to what the class enjoy. My first year, I taught that. The class were really into bugs, so we did the Ant and the Grasshopper, great story. My second year, the kids were really into werewolves for some reason, so we did the wolf in sheep's clothing. Next year, I don't know, maybe they'll be really into zoo animal, then we can do the lion and the mouse. But and it's not about regurgitating so that every kid has the same story and all of that, but being and that my kids next year are exactly the same as my kids this year, as you said. That I adapt and change myself to reach their needs.
I mean, you have to sort of not throw out the baby with the bathwater. You want to build on your strengths, on your successes, while also being open to new things and being flexible and which is tough.
Yeah.
which is very, very tough. And, there's a certain point at which your professional pride
It's
can
not like
creep in.
we're starting from scratch every time, and hopefully, well, I've had to do that sometimes going into some new schools. But, taking what went well and, as you said, building on it. Or taking what you've seen from other teachers. Maybe you had a partner teacher who did the lesson slightly differently and taking on what they did. And, if you are fortunate to be in 2 or 3 form, you can work together. And, I'm not a big fan of mirroring classrooms where every classroom is exactly the same, but you're coming to the same outcomes and you can use each other's techniques. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to take a moment to think here. I'm going to pose a question, though, which is challenging an assumption. So, is there something that people think makes a great teacher, but actually doesn't?
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi secondary school.
And we're back with the Saturday Social. I'm Will Mercer and I'm joined by Sam Houseago talking about great teachers. However, the question I posed to you a minute ago, Sam, was, is there something that people think makes great teachers, but maybe actually doesn't? And I think maybe you might see this in these fictional depictions of teachers. So, or rather, depictions of fictional teachers, as it should be. I'm going to circle back to the example I gave right at the beginning of the show, Mr. John Keating from Dead Poets Society. So we've got Robin Williams standing on his desk. I stand upon my desk to remind myself. That's my Robin Williams, by the way. That was pretty good. But we must constantly look at things in a different way. Now, I have to admit, dear listeners, you can't see this, but I can. When I read that out originally, Sam, you made a bit of a face. I'm sorry to say. You got something to say about John Keating's teaching style?
Yeah, just that it's a bit of a flashbang, and
Sit down, Mr. Keating. We need to have a tough conversation about that lesson I observed.
Yeah, and he was clearly trying to do it's film and whatever. I don't think any teacher would do something like that. But if you ever walked into the classroom and you saw a teacher doing that, being like, "What is going on in here?" And it is. Great.
Mr. Keating,
and,
come off the desk.
It's, well done. You probably got all the kids' attention, but there might have been a bit of a more sensible way. It's not my teaching style. It's just that. Yeah.
Actually, I did see a teacher of mine in school. He was doing an assembly, and it was in the school hall. There was a proper stage, and obviously most of the children are sat right. We're on chairs. The stage is above us, and in a feat of quite extraordinary athleticism, now I am older. Now I'm the age he was when he did it. He walked up and jumped onto the stage from where the children were sitting. And I have no idea what he spoke about after that. I've completely forgotten that. But I do remember him jumping onto the stage.
Yeah, so probably all those kids in that lesson were probably thinking, why is he on the table and not listening to a single word that he said? And then also, we didn't see the awkwardness of him being like, "Oh, excuse me, I just got to step down onto the floor now, guys. Can someone help me?" So I don't think...
If he had fallen off the desk mid-speech, it would have really detracted from the sort of, from the majesty of what he was doing.
Yeah. But to go back to your question, I think there's one phrase which I've really detested, which they always said to new teachers, and it's "don't smile till Christmas."
All right, okay.
And, that's what makes good teaching. You've got to show that you are the stern and firm. It kind of goes against the whole idea that we're supposed to create a rapport with these children, which I think is quite strong in the teacher training approach. At least what I believe is good practice. And I think many of my colleagues would agree. The "don't smile till Christmas," you don't have to look miserable while you're there. And you can be firm with a smile and just be like, "That's not how we do things here. I've asked you to stand up and go to your chairs, not run there," and so on and so forth.
Sensible fun is difficult to achieve, but it is possible. Sensible fun. It's definitely right. Just a comment here. Gillian Gabriel says John Keating was an inquirer before it was a buzzword. I'm going to leave that there. I'm not sure if that's a positive or not. I'm not quite sure.
I'm going to be really honest. I actually have never seen the film. I've only seen that clip where you go, "and my captain, my captain."
Oh, Captain, I saw it probably, 20 years ago. And I think that's what I remember from it as well, if indeed I remember that. But I took it there because often when you think about these famous fictional depictions of fictional teachers who are inspiring or whatever, I mean... you get this thing, right? And you see it with parents all the time. Everyone's an expert on education because everyone went to a school and was on the sort of receiving end, as it were, of an education. And that's true. I think maybe it goes back to Gillian's question from earlier. If we want to really consider what a great teacher is, well, children will only see a certain part of that. They will only see your front-facing, public-facing side. Parents will see a slightly different side, and maybe your colleagues, they see under the bonnet, as it were. They see what's really going on, and that's why they can maybe appreciate how tough it can be, and that's why they can appreciate what it takes to deal with some really tough situations. So I'm going to ask you one more question, because I am looking at the clock and I think we are going to run out of time very soon. So I'm going to jump and throw this in.
Timekeeping, good teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it happens at 2 o'clock where the bell's going to go in 7 minutes, and we'll be on to the next period. Can a teacher be great even if their pupils, their children, their students don't realise it at the time?
Definitely, because the child's view of what's going on is different to the teacher's view, and it's different to the observer's view, and the child might dread, we have to do writing again. But then the great thing is when you take that child's book, and let's say it's July, and you go flick all the way back to September, and you show them that growth, and you might not have completely enjoyed yourself, but look where you started and look where you've come in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's when they kind of realize it's been going well for us now. And I think that's the kind of, sometimes it can happen at the very end of the year, unfortunately, when it's a click in the moment, like, oh, I'm a better pupil, a better learner than I was when I started, and I understand more. And then they have 6 weeks off and they have to start all over again with this new person.
Yes. And the whole cycle begins again. Wow. What a fantastic answer. I thought that question was going to take 7 minutes to answer, but I'm not going to...
Well, then let me pose you...
No, I've got a different one.
I've got one, and let me pose you one question now, because we've only got 5 minutes. Do you think you are a good teacher?
I think I'm better than I used to be.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few reasons why. I think one, I think it's probably obvious from some of the answers we gave right at the beginning of this when we talk about what good teachers are. But I feel I am more relaxed in the classroom, which is not to say I'm more lax in terms of behavior management or expectations, but I think I allow more of myself to show. Now, I honestly have no idea. We talked about how we are perceived by our pupils, and I think you made an excellent point that they will create a persona for us, whether we like it or not. I don't know what my persona was in my NQT year. However, I think that if you spoke to my pupils who were taught by me in my very first year, if they do remember me, they might say something about strictness, or because I was doing it by the book and everything. Great. Whereas I'd like to think that my pupils now see me as a bit more of a real person, and just a bit more relaxed, someone who can enjoy it a bit more, someone who can have a bit more fun and just smile and laugh a bit more without sacrificing expectations or what we are there to do, which is to learn. All right, we have only a few moments, so I'm going to throw in, I love this idea of fictional depictions of teachers, fictional teachers, whatever it is. Miss Honey, right?
Yeah, Miss Honey.
Okay, or now you've made your views on Miss Honey, poor Miss Honey, very clear. So maybe I know what the answer to this one's going to be, but I'm going to throw a curveball. Miss Honey or Professor Snape? Okay, who's the better teacher and why?
Professor Snape was clearly very knowledgeable on his
subject. The man knew potions.
He did, but he didn't want to be the potions teacher. He wanted to be the defense against the dark arts.
There wasn't a lot of joy in Professor Snape's classroom, was there?
No.
He didn't bound in with a smile on his face.
He had favourites, didn't he? He liked the Slytherins, and I'm not a Slytherin. Sorry, I'm a Ravenclaw, so I don't
see, me too. Me too. You know why I'm a Ravenclaw?
Because you're smart.
Well, yes, but I'm a Ravenclaw because in all the books, right, all the drama, all the fuss, all the chasing around after giant snakes and mirrors that show you your heart's desire. It's all Gryffindor and Slytherin and to a lesser extent Hufflepuff doing. Ravenclaw, they get their heads down, they get an education.
Yeah, they are.
Right? That's what I would do.
They are passing their OWOs.
I'm not here to die. No. I'm here to to pass my OWOs. I'm here to learn something at Hogwarts. So that's why I would be in Ravenclaw, because they're here to learn.
And I think Snape, he led those lessons very well. he had a mind, and he let the stupid ones know they're stupid. Well, Miss Honey, she just spoke to Matilda and ignored the rest of the class.
Snape never adopted Draco Malfoy or anything, did he? At any point?
No, he did not. And I think Harry Potter, who named his kid after Snape, realised later that Snape was a great teacher. We're about to get completely destroyed by Harry Potter for this scene. Snape realised that Harry Potter realised that Snape was a great teacher because he named a kid after him. Several.
Well, is this, maybe that goes back to the question I said before, right? Can a teacher be great even if their students don't realise it at the time? If we've got year 7 Harry and Ron and Hermione in here, no, they hate Snape. He's terrible.
If they save my life against the Dark Lord,
then they're probably a pretty good teacher.
Yes, I think that's what he is. It's been a long time since I've read it. New TV series coming out. I'll watch that.
Oh, exactly. I'll be watching that with Ofsted regulations in hand, ready to grade the quality of those lessons. All right. So, in our qualities of a good teacher, I think we can add what you said about saving them from the dark arts, because, do you care about your pupils if you're not willing to do that?
Yeah, the new dark arts of YouTube and
Indeed.
Twitch
Indeed.
Exactly.
We're going to leave it there. We are. Thank you, Sam.
Thank
Really enjoyed that. I hope that's given people listening, I hope people have agreed with some, disagreed with some of what we've said, but I hope it's got you thinking about the great teachers, the good teachers who you have known and what makes them so. This has been the Saturday Social. Thank you so much for listening.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.